I told my therapist everything about my love life, and then met the perfect man online. The truth, she built him from my secrets. I moved to Seattle thinking I could start over. Work was busy but lonely, nights spent in my tiny apartment staring at the rain sliding down the window. I started therapy because my last relationship had left me raw and confused. Dr. Palmer seemed kind, attentive, someone who listened without judgment. She asked questions that made me think, made me confront my mistakes, my heartbreaks, my fears. I told her everything, the arguments, the jealousies, my insecurities. I trusted her completely, as I had no one else. Every week, the sessions became a place I could dump my soul, expecting guidance, not manipulation. Months went by. I started feeling stronger, more confident, more open to love. I even laughed again when talking about dating, even joined an online app she never knew I'd try. Then I saw him, a man named Ethan, perfectly attentive, witty, the exact kind of person I imagined in my ideal partner. Our chats flowed like I'd known him forever, every joke landing, every word resonating. And somehow, the way he phrased things, the questions he asked, they sounded familiar, too familiar. But I pushed it aside. It wasn't until a random comment triggered a memory that my stomach dropped. Ethan asked something I'd only ever said in therapy. My heart skipped a beat. Could it be? Number. She would never. Would she? I decided to test it, subtly, carefully, probing without revealing suspicion. The details he revealed matched everything I had confessed, the way I described heartbreak, my ideal date, even my quirks. My mind raced. This wasn't coincidence. Someone had been listening, taking notes, and now I was falling for a man built from my confessions. My hands shook as I closed the laptop. How could someone I trusted so much betray me? My heart wanted to scream, to run, to never speak to anyone again, but a part of me couldn't stop reading his messages. There was comfort there, laughter there, warmth I had been craving. I realized I was trapped in a paradox, the perfect man made from my secrets, and the betrayal of the person I confided in most. Dr. Palmer, I had to know. I had to be sure. The realization that she had manipulated my trust to build a dating profile left me feeling naked and enraged, but I needed proof before I could confront either of them. I stared at the rain sliding down the Seattle window, the reflection of Ethan's smile on my laptop glowing faintly, and whispered to myself, how far would she go? And how much of him is really real? If you discovered someone online knew everything about you, even things you only told your therapist, would you confront them or investigate silently? I couldn't sleep that night. Seattle's rain tapped against the window like a reminder of my own racing thoughts. I kept replaying Ethan's messages in my mind, every word echoing like it was written directly from the pages of my therapy notes. I tried to convince myself I was being paranoid, that maybe it was just coincidence, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. The way he phrased things, the little comments about my favorite coffee shop, the jokes only I would make, it all came from me. And the only person who knew those things besides me was Dr. Palmer. The next morning, I forced myself to act normal. I told Ethan I had a busy day, kept the messages polite but short. My stomach twisted with guilt, excitement, and fear all at once. Part of me wanted to continue talking to him, to experience this strange, perfect connection, while another part of me screamed to stop before I fell too hard. But every time I closed my laptop, I felt an ache, a longing to peek back to see if he had written again. I started thinking back to my sessions with Dr. Palmer. I remembered the way she took notes, always typing quickly on her laptop, sometimes pausing to glance at me like she was piecing together a puzzle. At the time, I had thought it was thorough care, attentive listening. Now it felt predatory. I pictured her writing down every detail, carefully crafting a profile based on my vulnerabilities. A shiver ran down my spine. Was she manipulating me for this? Was my therapist, someone I trusted implicitly, orchestrating my love life like it was a science experiment? I spent the next few days in a haze. I tried to confront the thought, to dismiss it, to tell myself I was imagining things, but every new message from Ethan made my suspicion worse. He knew too much, too intimately, and she had access to everything I ever said about relationships, my deal breakers, my fantasies, my fears. The more I thought about it, the more it made sense. Dr. Palmer had been using me, my confessions, to construct a man who would fall perfectly into my life. That realization left me angry, heartbroken, and confused. How could someone who was supposed to help me, someone I had entrusted with my rawest emotions, use them against me without my knowledge or consent? And yet, despite everything, I couldn't ignore Ethan. He existed in my reality now, my messages glowing on the screen, the way he made me feel seen and understood. It was intoxicating. By the end of the week, I made a decision. I needed answers. I had to confront Dr. Palmer, figure out if my suspicions were true, but I also needed to be careful. I didn't want to destroy the connection I had with Ethan if it wasn't her fault. I had to unravel the truth slowly, delicately, without alerting anyone too soon. Seattle's drizzle fell heavier that evening, the city glowing through my apartment window. I took a deep breath and whispered to myself, I need to know the truth, even if it hurts. Would you investigate if you suspected your therapist was manipulating your personal life, or would you cut ties immediately? The following Monday, I walked into Dr. Palmer's office with a mix of dread and determination. The familiar smell of coffee and the faint lavender from her diffuser hit me like a wave. I sat down, trying to appear calm, though my hands trembled slightly. She smiled warmly, the way she always did, as if nothing in the world could disturb the careful bubble of trust she created around me. Good morning, Emma, she said, tilting her head slightly. How have you been since our last session? I swallowed hard. I've been okay, I said, forcing a smile. Actually, there's something I need to talk about. Her expression shifted subtly, just for a fraction of a second, a flicker of curiosity, or perhaps calculation. I couldn't tell. My pulse quickened. It's about someone I met online, Ethan. Her eyebrows lifted just enough to let me know she knew him. She leaned back slightly, pretending to be casual. Oh, tell me about him. I hesitated, then decided to tread carefully. I described Ethan, the conversations we'd had, the way he seemed to understand me in ways no one else did. I tried not to reveal the connection to my sessions too obviously, but I couldn't stop the creeping feeling in my chest, the realization that she already knew everything. She nodded thoughtfully, jotting down notes as she always did, her eyes scanning me like she was reading a script she had written herself. Every word I spoke felt rehearsed. Every detail I shared seemed to bounce off invisible walls that only she could see. My heart sank. I had been giving her all my secrets, and now I feared those secrets were the blueprint for this man I had been falling for. I left the office that day, feeling hollow. The city streets felt heavier, the rain falling harder against the pavement. I walked past coffee shops, bookstores, and the familiar corners of Seattle I had once loved, but nothing felt real anymore. I couldn't stop thinking about Ethan, about how much of him was really him, and how much was my life, my words, mirrored back at me by someone who had betrayed my trust. That night, I opened my laptop and stared at his messages. Each sentence was familiar, each joke or question reflecting my own confessions from therapy. I felt a wave of anger and sadness crash over me. How could someone exploit my vulnerabilities this way? I had trusted her with my heart, my fears, and my dreams, and she had made a man from them. But then there was a pang of guilt. Ethan didn't know, didn't seem aware, and he made me feel alive again in ways I hadn't in months. Could I deny my feelings just because someone else had manipulated the connection? I didn't know if I wanted to. I decided I needed proof, something tangible that could confirm my suspicion without ruining the life I was starting to rebuild. I started keeping notes, screenshots of conversations, comparisons with my sessions, anything that could show a pattern. I knew confronting Dr. Palmer directly without evidence would be disastrous, but I couldn't ignore the creeping suspicion any longer. Seattle's skyline glimmered outside my window as I sat, compiling everything. My chest ached with a strange mixture of fear and anticipation. I whispered to myself, I will find the truth, even if it destroys everything I've built. If you discovered your therapist might be using your personal life for manipulation, would you gather evidence first or confront them immediately? I couldn't focus at work anymore. Every time my phone buzzed with a message from Ethan, my heart jumped, and then my mind raced back to Dr. Palmer. I tried to tell myself it wasn't her fault, that Ethan was his own person, but the parallels were too many to ignore. The way he asked questions I only ever mentioned in therapy, the stories he told that mirrored my confessions, it was all too precise. One rainy evening, I found myself scrolling through our conversations, line by line. I highlighted phrases, topics, even tiny jokes, then compared them to my session notes. The pattern was undeniable. My therapist had used my words, my desires, my fears to shape a man who would fit perfectly into my life. My stomach twisted as I realized the magnitude of the betrayal. Everything I had shared in confidence had been weaponized, not to help me heal, but to craft someone who could ensnare me emotionally. The next morning, I called a close friend, someone I trusted outside of therapy. I explained everything in hushed tones, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and fear. She listened patiently, her silence amplifying the weight of the words. Finally, she said, "You need to be careful, Emma. This is serious. You can't confront her alone, and you can't let Ethan find out yet. He might be innocent, but you don't know how he'll react." Her warning made sense. I needed a plan. I couldn't stop talking to Ethan. It was too late for that. He had become a part of my life, a presence that made me feel seen, in a way I hadn't in months, but I couldn't let the manipulation continue. I had to gather evidence and understand exactly how far Dr. Palmer had gone. I started spending late nights going through every email, every note she had taken, comparing them to my conversations with Ethan. The similarities were shocking. Words I had whispered about heartbreak, phrases describing the perfect date, even casual confessions about my quirks, they were all reflected in him. He wasn't just inspired by my words, he was constructed from them. Then came the hardest part, Ethan himself. I couldn't stop thinking about him, couldn't stop wondering if he had any clue about what had happened. Was he complicit, or was he as unaware as I'd hoped? Every message, every late-night call felt like walking a tightrope. I loved him, but the foundation of our connection was built on betrayal. Finally, I made a decision. I would confront Dr. Palmer, but not without being ready. I needed a record of everything, proof that couldn't be denied. I printed transcripts, screenshots, notes from my sessions, all lined up on my dining table like evidence in a trial. The storm outside mirrored the storm inside me, the rain tapping relentlessly against the window, the wind whipping around the apartment, and my mind spinning with the impending confrontation. I whispered to myself, I trusted her with everything, and she used it to control my heart. This ends now. If someone you trusted manipulated your love life without your knowledge, would you protect the relationship or expose the betrayal immediately? The night before I planned to confront Dr. Palmer, I couldn't sleep. My apartment in Seattle felt smaller somehow, walls closing in with memories I had thought were private. I traced my fingers over my laptop, over the messages from Ethan, over the printed transcripts of my therapy sessions. Every word I had shared had been a seed she planted, and he had grown from it. I kept picturing him. His laugh, the way he said my name, the little habits I'd only described in therapy, sitting with his coffee mug in hand, tapping his fingers when he was nervous. I hated that she had done this, but part of me still loved him. The conflict inside me was suffocating. Could I even blame him if he had no idea? He was crafted from my heart, yes, but he was real in front of me, alive and breathing and making me feel alive again. Morning came gray and rainy, the kind of Seattle day that seeps into your bones. I dressed carefully, rehearsing my words, imagining every possible scenario. I wasn't sure if I wanted an apology, revenge, or just answers. Maybe all three. When I arrived at her office, the receptionist smiled at me as if nothing unusual had happened. I forced a smile, swallowed the knot in my throat, and walked in. Dr. Palmer looked up from her laptop. "Emma, you're early," she said, tilting her head in that familiar way. Her smile was calm, professional, the kind that made you trust her instantly. But I wasn't the same Emma she remembered. I had questions, suspicions, and anger I couldn't contain. "I need to talk to you about Ethan," I said, my voice steady but sharp. I watched her expression change for the first time, a brief flicker of unease crossing her features before she masked it. What about him? She asked. I took a deep breath. Everything. The way he knows things only I could have told you in therapy. I need to know if you... My voice caught. I wanted to say manipulated me, built him from my confessions, but I forced the words back down. Had any involvement. For a heartbeat, she didn't speak. Then she smiled, just slightly too wide. Emma, I think you're imagining things. Therapists don't create boyfriends from client sessions. That's unethical and impossible. But her eyes betrayed her. A flicker, a twitch, something small, almost invisible, but it confirmed everything I had suspected. My stomach churned. I pulled out my folder of evidence, laying it across the desk, transcripts, screenshots, side-by-side comparisons. Then explain this, I said firmly, my heart hammering. Explain how everything I told you matches what he says. Explain how my secrets built him. Her hand hovered over the folder, hesitant. Emma, I held her gaze. Don't lie. I trusted you with everything, and you used it to manipulate me. I need the truth. Now. The room was silent, except for the faint hum of the heater. I waited, every muscle tense, knowing that what came next could change everything, my trust, my love, my life. If you had undeniable evidence your therapist manipulated your love life, would you confront them directly or involve authorities first? Her hand trembled slightly as she glanced at the folder, then back at me. For the first time, she looked human, unsure, exposed. Emma, you have no idea how complicated this is, she said quietly. Her voice had lost its usual calm authority, replaced by a fragile edge I had never heard before. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay steady. Complicated? You took everything I said, my fears, my desires, my private thoughts, and used them to construct the man I'm falling for. How is that complicated? My voice cracked, but I kept going. I trusted you, and you built someone from my secrets. That's betrayal. She sighed, running a hand through her hair. I never intended for it to go this far, she admitted. I thought I was helping you. I wanted to give you someone who would finally see you, who would understand you. I got carried away. I stared at her, the anger inside me boiling. Carried away? You crossed every line, every ethical boundary. This isn't therapy, this is manipulation. This is criminal in every sense of the word. Her gaze dropped to the floor. I know. And I'm sorry, Emma, truly. I never wanted to hurt you. I just thought I was giving you a chance at happiness you couldn't find on your own. I felt my hands clench into fists. Part of me wanted to scream, to punch the wall, to throw the folder across the room, but another part, the part that still loved Ethan, wanted answers. Where is he? I asked quietly. Where is Ethan right now? Did he know? She hesitated. No, he doesn't know. He thinks he's just himself. I never told him about you. I never told him about the sessions. I didn't want to ruin him. I swallowed the mix of relief and fury that surged in me. Ethan didn't know. Maybe he was innocent. But the fact remained. He existed because of her, because she had taken my trust and spun it into something tangible, something I couldn't ignore. I forced myself to take a step back, breathe. I need to see him. I need to know how much of him is really him and how much is you. My voice was quiet, but there was steel beneath it. She nodded slowly. I'll arrange it. But Emma, please be careful. He's real in his own way. You can't erase what's already happened. I left her office feeling a mix of fear, anger, and something like anticipation. Seattle's streets blurred as I walked home, rain soaking my hair, my thoughts spinning. I had questions, doubts, and an uneasy hope that Ethan was more than the reflection of my confessions. That night, I opened my laptop and stared at his last message. My heart ached and fluttered at the same time. I typed back slowly, carefully, trying to mask the storm inside me. I told him about my day, about the rain, about random things, keeping my deeper fears to myself. But one thought lingered, heavy and insistent. I was about to meet a man who may have been created from my soul, my secrets, my most vulnerable moments, and I had no idea what that would mean for my heart. If you found out the person you love was partly a creation of someone else, would you still meet them or walk away forever? The next few days passed in a blur. I barely slept, barely ate. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart jumped, hoping it was Ethan, dreading the moment I would finally see him face to face. Dr. Palmer had agreed to arrange a meeting, though her warnings echoed in my mind. He was real in his own way, and I had no idea how much of him was shaped by her. When the day finally arrived, Seattle's gray skies seemed heavier, rain falling in steady sheets. I arrived at the cafe she had suggested, one I had never been to before, but that felt intimate and quiet. The smell of coffee and pastries filled the air, but I barely noticed. I scanned the room, every face making my pulse quicken. And then I saw him. Ethan. Or maybe Lucas. Part of me couldn't separate the real person from the creation I had been manipulated into loving. He sat at a corner table, eyes on his phone, smiling softly. When he looked up and saw me, his expression shifted, and for a moment, the world outside that cafe disappeared. His smile was genuine, warm, and it made my chest ache with a confusing mix of longing and fear. I walked over, my hands trembling, and he stood, a little unsure as if he could sense my hesitation. Emma? He asked, his voice familiar in a way that made me shiver. I nodded, words failing me for a moment. We sat down, and the first awkward silence stretched between us. I wanted to ask everything, to confront him, to demand explanations. But the moment I saw him in front of me, breathing, alive, I realized that part of me just wanted to see if he was real, beyond the reflection of my secrets. We started talking, carefully at first. I asked him about his life, his hobbies, his childhood, anything that could reveal the real man beneath the words that mirrored my therapy sessions. He answered openly, sharing stories that no one else could have known, details that didn't exist in my memories. With every story, I felt a small relief, a flicker of hope that he wasn't just a mirror of my confessions, but a person with his own experiences, his own heart. But the tension never fully left. Every time he laughed, I couldn't help but think, did he say that because she told him to? Or was it genuinely him? Every time he asked a question that aligned perfectly with something I had said in therapy, my stomach twisted with suspicion. By the time we left the cafe, rain-soaked and tired, I realized something important. Ethan, or Lucas, was real, but the foundation of our connection was tainted. My trust had been exploited, my love manipulated, yet the feelings I had for him were undeniably my own. That night, alone in my apartment, I stared at the ceiling, heart heavy but beating. I had choices to make: how to protect myself, how to confront the betrayal, and whether to give a chance to a love that was born from deception but had grown into something tangible. If the person you fell for was partly created from someone else's manipulation, would you follow your heart or your mind? The days after the cafe meeting were restless. I couldn't stop thinking about Ethan, about the way he laughed, the warmth in his eyes, and the stories he had shared that were undeniably his. Yet, the shadow of Dr. Palmer's betrayal lingered over everything. Every message, every call, every late-night text felt like a reminder that our connection had been built on a foundation I hadn't chosen. I tried to distract myself with work, walking through the rainy streets of Seattle, letting the drizzle soak my hair as I replayed conversations in my mind. Part of me wanted to believe in Ethan fully, to trust the feelings I had for him. Another part of me felt wary, wondering if the person I loved was too entangled in manipulation to be real. Then came a moment I didn't expect. Ethan called me late one night, voice soft, hesitant. "Emma, can I ask you something?" "Of course," I said, my heart tightening. "Do you feel like I'm someone you would have chosen for yourself? Or does it feel like someone else created me?" His question hit me like a punch. I had rehearsed how to confront Dr. Palmer, how to protect myself, but I hadn't expected Ethan to ask me to confront the truth so directly. I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. "It's complicated," I admitted. "Part of me worries that you were influenced by her, but the other part knows that you're real. You have your own experiences, your own choices, and that part, it wants to believe in you." There was silence on the line, then a small, almost vulnerable laugh. "I was afraid you'd hate me," he said quietly. "I didn't know any of this was happening. I thought I was just me." That night, I realized something important. Ethan wasn't Dr. Palmer's creation. He was his own person, yes, shaped unknowingly by her manipulation, but still capable of independent thought, emotion, and love. The feelings I had for him, my laughter at his jokes, my anticipation of his messages, my heart skipping when he called, were mine, and mine alone. Over the next week, we started being more honest with each other, cautiously peeling back layers, testing boundaries, building trust on our own terms. Each conversation reminded me that love, even when manipulated, could still grow if given a chance to breathe in truth. But the shadow of betrayal still loomed. I knew I couldn't ignore Dr. Palmer's actions forever. The trust I had once placed in her had been broken, and part of me wanted justice, or at least confrontation. But for now, I needed to focus on what was real. Ethan, the man in front of me, separate from manipulation, separate from my confessions, separate from the therapist who had tried to control us both. Seattle's streets glimmered with rain as I walked home one evening, phone in hand, a message from Ethan lighting up the screen. "See you soon?" My chest fluttered. I typed back a quick yes, smiling despite the ache that lingered in my heart. For the first time in months, I felt the possibility of something genuine. And though the road ahead was uncertain, I knew one thing. I wasn't letting betrayal dictate who I loved anymore. Can love survive when it begins with manipulation, or is the betrayal too strong to overcome? Weeks passed, and slowly, cautiously, Ethan and I found a rhythm together. Each meeting, each message, each phone call became a small act of reclaiming trust. Trust in him, trust in myself, trust in the possibility that love could exist even after deception. But even as we grew closer, the shadow of Dr. Palmer's betrayal never fully disappeared. One rainy afternoon, I sat in my apartment, laptop open, scrolling through the printed transcripts of my therapy sessions. I could still feel the sting of betrayal, the way she had taken my confessions and shaped a person who could mirror them perfectly. My fingers hovered over my keyboard, indecision churning inside me. Should I finally confront her formally, report her unethical behavior, or leave the past buried to protect the fragile love I was building? Then Ethan's message appeared. "Want to take a walk? Clear our heads?" I smiled and typed back quickly, meeting him in the soft drizzle of Seattle streets. The air smelled of rain and coffee, and as we walked side by side, I realized how different this felt from the first time we met in that cafe. This time, I was more aware, more guarded, but also more hopeful. We talked openly, cautiously, about everything that had happened, the way we had met, the strange coincidences, the unease that lingered beneath the surface. Ethan listened intently, his hands warm around mine, his eyes never leaving mine. "I don't know how to fix what's been done," he said quietly, "but I want to build something real with you. Not based on secrets, not based on someone else's manipulation. Just us." I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes. His words were simple, but they carried a weight I hadn't felt in months. Someone who had been part of a deception could still choose honesty, could still choose to be himself, could still choose me. And for the first time, I allowed myself to believe it. We spent the evening walking along the waterfront, watching reflections shimmer in the dark water, the lights of the city dancing in tiny golden bursts. Seattle's grayness had faded into something soft, something intimate, something like hope. And for the first time, I felt like I could breathe without suspicion clawing at my chest. Later that night, I sat at my desk staring at the transcripts of Dr. Palmer's sessions one last time. I didn't delete them. I didn't file them away. I just left them there. They were a reminder of how far I'd come, how close I'd come to losing myself, and how careful I needed to be with my heart moving forward. Ethan's last text of the night appeared on my screen. "Sleep well. Tomorrow is ours." I smiled, feeling the warmth of his words seep into my chest. I had fallen in love with him, not with the version shaped by Dr. Palmer, but with the real man, the one who chose to be honest, the one who chose to meet me halfway. Seattle's rain tapped softly against my window as I whispered to myself, "I'll never let someone else control who I love again." Would you give love a chance if it began under deception? Or would you protect your heart and walk away? The morning was quiet, Seattle's drizzle soft against my window, the kind of day that made the city feel endless and introspective. I sat at my desk, phone in hand, staring at Ethan's last message. We had spent weeks untangling the truth, rebuilding trust, and learning to separate the man in front of me from the manipulation that had brought him there. And yet, a part of me still carried the weight of betrayal, Dr. Palmer's actions, the violation of my most private thoughts. I knew I had to make a choice, hold on to anger or embrace the love that had grown from it. I typed a message to Ethan, hesitated, deleted it, and then typed again. Meet me at the park, I want to talk. Within minutes, he replied, be there in 10. My heart raced as I grabbed my coat and stepped out into the soft, misty rain, the smell of wet pavement and coffee filling my senses. The park was quiet, empty except for the faint echo of children's laughter in the distance. Ethan stood under a canopy of trees, hands in his pockets, looking nervous and real. When he saw me, he smiled, and I felt a flicker of warmth that cut through the lingering cold of doubt. We walked slowly side by side, the silence comfortable yet charged with unspoken words. Finally, I stopped, taking a deep breath. Ethan, I need you to understand something, I said. Everything that happened, it wasn't your fault, but it changed me, and it changed how I see trust, how I see love. I don't want to lose what we have, but I need honesty, always. He looked at me, eyes steady, unwavering. Emma, I swear, I didn't know, and I never wanted to hurt you. Every word I've said, every choice I've made since meeting you, I've made because I care about you. Not because of her, not because of anyone else. I felt the tension in my chest ease, the anger and betrayal, melting into something fragile but real. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe in us. I reached for his hand, feeling the warmth of reality. The man in front of me, separate from manipulation, fully his own. We walked in silence for a while, watching the rain pool around the park benches, reflecting the city lights. In that moment, I realized something important. Love could survive deception if both hearts chose truth. Ethan had chosen honesty. I had chosen to trust him cautiously, carefully, but fully. By the time we left the park, the drizzle had stopped, leaving Seattle gleaming under a soft, diffused light. I looked at him, feeling something I hadn't felt in months, hope. We weren't perfect. The shadow of manipulation would always linger, a reminder of betrayal. But together, we could build something real, something ours. That night, alone in my apartment, I sent a final message to Dr. Palmer. I know what you did. I'm moving on, and so is he. Don't contact me again. The words felt heavy but freeing. I had reclaimed my life, my trust, and my love. I turned off my phone, sat back, and smiled. I had learned the hardest lesson of all. Betrayal could shape the beginning of love, but only honesty and choice could define its future. Would you forgive someone who manipulated your life if the person they manipulated turned out to be real and loving?